Ma'am, step back. You do not have authorization for this elevator. Show me your ID. Now.
I'm not required to show ID to enter my building. Let me scan the card.
You don't fit executive access. Last warning, hand over the ID or you're being detained.
You're blocking the owner of this property. This camera is recording.
The security feed in the lobby of the Vance Plaza was high-definition recording at 60 frames per second, capturing every polished marble tile and every shaft of morning sunlight cutting through the glass atrium. But the camera couldn't capture the feeling of pride Eleanor Vance felt every time she walked through those revolving doors. At 62 years old, Eleanor didn't walk with a strut. She walked with the calculated precision of a woman who had spent 40 years turning a small inheritance into a commercial real estate empire. She was wearing a bespoke cream-colored suit that cost more than most mid-sized sedans, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant tight bun. She carried a leather briefcase that had traveled with her to closing tables in London, Tokyo, and New York. To anyone paying attention, she looked exactly like what she was the owner of the building. But Trent Miller wasn't paying attention to the cut of her suit or the quality of her briefcase. Trent was 29 years old with a jawline he spent too much time admiring in the mirror and a security uniform that was a size too tight in the biceps. He had been working for Titan Security Solutions for 3 weeks, stationed at the front desk of Vance Plaza, a post he considered beneath his capabilities. He spent most of his shift scanning the lobby for threats that didn't exist, desperate for a moment of action to break the monotony of signing in couriers and directing lost interns. When he saw Eleanor Vance walking toward the private elevator bank, the one reserved exclusively for executive leadership, he didn't see the CEO. He saw an older black woman carrying a bag moving with a confidence he found irritatingly presumptuous. Eleanor didn't even look at the security desk as she approached the turnstiles. She retrieved her gold-tier access card from her purse, the one coded with unrestricted clearance to every square inch of the 30-story structure. She raised it to the reader, expecting the familiar beep and the green light. "Hold it right there," a voice boomed across the lobby. Eleanor paused the card, hovering inches from the scanner. She turned her head, slightly confused. The lobby was relatively quiet at 9:15 a.m., the morning rush having largely subsided. She looked around, assuming the security guard was addressing someone else, perhaps a courier trying to bypass the freight entrance. But when she turned back, she found Trent Miller standing directly in her path, his chest puffed out, his hand resting ominously on his duty belt. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, her voice calm, possessing the rich, smoky timbre of a woman who had silenced boardrooms with a whisper. "I said hold it," Trent repeated, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "Where do you think you're going?" Eleanor blinked her mind, taking a moment to process the absurdity of the question. "I am going to my office, young man. Please step aside." "The service entrance is around back," Trent said, pointing a thumb over his shoulder toward the loading docks. "Deliveries, catering, and soliciting go through the freight elevator. This lobby is for tenants and authorized guests only." Eleanor turned her body fully toward him now. The morning sun hit her face, illuminating the lines of age and wisdom etched there. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. "I am not catering, and I am certainly not a solicitor. I am going to the 30th floor. The 30th floor is executive management." Trent sneered, a smirk playing on his lips. "You got a cleaning crew appointment up there because they didn't call down for one." The air in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor tightened her grip on her briefcase. She had faced discrimination in loan offices in the 80s. She had been ignored by contractors in the 90s. But to be stopped in the lobby of the building that bore her name in polished brass on the exterior facade was a new level of indignity. "I suggest you check your tone," Eleanor said, her voice lowering, becoming dangerous. "I have an access pass right here. If you will step out of my way, I will demonstrate that I am authorized to be here." Trent shook his head, planting his feet wide in a stance of aggression. "I'm not letting you near those turnstiles until I see some real ID. Driver's license. Now. And I want to see a work order for whatever job you think you're doing up there." Eleanor Vance stood motionless, the gold access card still visible in her right hand. The morning activity in the lobby had ground to a halt. A pair of young attorneys from the second floor had stopped near the coffee kiosk, watching the interaction with wide eyes. A courier with a stack of packages paused by the revolving door. It was the kind of spectacle Eleanor had spent her entire career avoiding. She believed in discretion in solving problems behind closed doors, but Trent Miller was dragging this out into the open, making a theater of his own bias. "Officer," Eleanor said, enunciating the word with distinct coolness. "This is a coded security key. It is issued by your company. If you simply let me scan it, the system will bring up my photograph and my credentials on your monitor. There is no need for my driver's license." "I don't care about the key card," Trent snapped. "People find those things on the ground all the time, or steal them. For all I know, you lifted that off a manager in the parking garage." "Lifted it," Eleanor repeated. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and sharp. "You are accusing me of theft now." "I'm saying you don't fit the profile of someone who works on the 30th floor," Trent said, crossing his arms. "Now hand over the ID or I'm escorting you out. I've got strict orders to keep this lobby secure from unauthorized personnel. We've had issues with solicitors bothering the tenants." "I am the tenant," Eleanor said, her patience thinning like ice in a whiskey glass. "Actually, I am the landlord. My name is Eleanor Vance." Trent laughed. It was a short, barking sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Yeah, right. And I'm the mayor. Lady, do you know how many times I've heard stuff like that? I know the owner. I own the place. Save the creative writing for someone who cares. ID, now." Eleanor realized that logic was not going to penetrate the wall of arrogance standing in front of her. This young man had decided who she was the moment she walked through the door. To him, she was an invisible woman, a laborer, someone to be managed and controlled. He couldn't conceive of a world where she signed his paycheck. "I am not giving you my driver's license to enter my own property," Eleanor stated firmly. "I am going to walk around you, scan this card, and go to my office. Once I am there, I will call your supervisor, Mr. Henderson, and we will discuss your future at this site." She took a step to the right, attempting to bypass him. Trent moved faster than she expected. He lunged sideways, physically blocking her path, his chest bumping against her shoulder. It was a violation of every protocol in the book. Security guards were observed and report hands off unless there was an immediate threat to life. Eleanor stumbled back, slightly shocked by the physical contact. "Don't you walk away from me!" Trent shouted, his voice cracking with adrenaline. "You are detained, you hear me? You're not going anywhere." "You just assaulted me," Eleanor said softly, staring at him. She wasn't fearful. She was calculating. "I stopped a breach," Trent countered, though a flicker of doubt appeared in his eyes. He covered it quickly with bluster. "You refused a direct order from security personnel. That's grounds for removal. Now give me the ID or I'm calling the cops." "Call them," Eleanor said, smoothing the lapel of her blazer. "In fact, I insist. Because when they arrive, this situation is going to resolve itself in a way you are not going to like." The two attorneys near the coffee stand were whispering now, one of them holding up a phone. The camera lens pointed directly at the scene. Trent noticed the phone, and his posture stiffened. He knew he had to win this interaction now. He couldn't back down. If he backed down, he looked weak. If he backed down, he admitted he was wrong. "You think you can just waltz in here and do whatever you want?" Trent hissed, leaning in close so only she could hear. "Not on my watch. You people always think the rules don't apply to you." "We people?" Eleanor asked, her eyebrow arching. "And who exactly are we people?" "Troublemakers," Trent said, pulling his radio from his belt. He keyed the mic, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. "Central, this is Miller at Vance Plaza. I've got a 1096 in the lobby. Belligerent female refusing to identify, attempting to push past security. I need PD here now." The term 1096 was code for a mental subject or someone causing a disturbance. Eleanor knew this because she had sat on the police oversight board for the city for 5 years. She watched Trent Miller speak into his radio with a mix of pity and fury. He wasn't just stopping her. He was actively constructing a narrative where she was the aggressor, the crazy woman, the threat. He was weaponizing the system against her because his ego couldn't handle the fact that she wasn't afraid of him. "You have made a grave mistake," Eleanor said, her voice steady. She reached into her purse. "Hands out of the bag." Trent yelled, his hand dropping to the pepper spray canister on his belt. "Drop the bag. Put it on the floor." "I am retrieving my phone," Eleanor said, moving slowly, deliberately. She pulled out her smartphone. "I am calling the building manager." "You're not calling anyone." Trent stepped forward again, and for a terrifying second, Eleanor thought he was going to snatch the phone from her hand. But the presence of the witnesses, now a small crowd of 5 or 6 people, seemed to tether him to reality just enough to stop him from physical theft. Eleanor dialed the number for Sarah Jenkins, the general manager of Vance Plaza. Sarah was likely on the 30th floor, already reviewing the quarterly projections. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. Eleanor cursed silently. Sarah was probably in the morning briefing. She hung up and looked at the reception desk situated about 20 feet behind where Trent was standing. A young woman named Jessica was sitting there looking terrified. Jessica was a temporary receptionist filling in for the regular staff. She was 22, fresh out of college, and clearly overwhelmed. "Jessica," Eleanor called out, projecting her voice past Trent. The receptionist jumped. Yes?" "Call Sarah Jenkins immediately. Tell her Eleanor Vance is being detained in the lobby by security." Trent spun around, pointing a finger at the receptionist. "Don't you do a thing. I'm in charge of this situation. This woman is a trespasser. You make that call and you're interfering with a security operation." Jessica froze her hand, hovering over the desk phone. She looked from the angry uniformed man to the well-dressed older woman. Fear paralyzed her. She didn't know who Eleanor was. She had only started 2 days ago and had never met the owner in person. To her, Eleanor was just a name on the letterhead. "Jessica, I pay your agency," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Make the call. I don't know who to listen to." Jessica stammered, tears forming in her eyes. "Listen to the guy with the badge," Trent shouted. He turned back to Eleanor, satisfied that he had severed her lifeline. "You're done. Police are 2 minutes out. You're going to jail for trespassing and disorderly conduct." "Disorderly conduct?" Eleanor repeated, looking around at the silent, stunned lobby. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't used profanity. I haven't threatened you. The only disorder here is the one you are creating." "You're defying authority," Trent said. "That's disorderly." The revolving doors spun, and the sound of heavy boots hit the marble floor. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. 2 uniformed police officers walked in, their eyes scanning the scene. They saw Trent, a man in a security uniform, standing tall and pointing. They saw Eleanor, a black woman, standing near the elevators. The visual bias set in immediately. The man in the uniform was the ally. The civilian was the problem. "What's going on here?" the older of the 2 officers asked. He was a sergeant name tag reading Officer Kowalski. He was in his 50s, tired-looking, holding his thumbs in his vest. Trent immediately stepped toward them, adopting a tone of professional camaraderie. "Officers, thanks for coming. I've got a trespasser here. Refused to ID, tried to force her way past the checkpoint, became aggressive when I tried to stop her. She's been shouting at staff and causing a scene." Kowalski looked at Eleanor. He didn't see the owner of the building. He saw the picture Trent had just painted. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the turnstiles." Eleanor looked at Officer Kowalski. She recognized him. Not personally, but she recognized the type. He was looking for the path of least resistance. Arresting or removing the disorderly woman was the quickest way to clear the call and get back to his coffee. "Officer," Eleanor began, keeping her hands visible. "This man is lying to you. I am the owner of this building. I have an access card which he refused to let me scan." Kowalski sighed. He had heard every story in the book. "Ma'am, if security says you need to leave, you need to leave. It's private property." "It is my private property," Eleanor insisted. "If you will allow me to demonstrate—" "I'm not going to ask you again," Kowalski said, his voice dropping an octave. He took a step toward her, his partner, a younger officer named Davis, moving to flank her on the left. "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. You are trespassing. You need to leave the premises now." She refused to show ID. Trent piped up from the side, emboldened by the police backup. "I asked her 5 times. She started yelling about how she owns the place. Classic delusion." Officer Davis reached for the handcuffs on his belt. "Ma'am, turn around." Eleanor felt a cold knot in her stomach. It was actually happening. She was about to be handcuffed in the lobby of the building she had built from the ground up. The sheer injustice of it made her dizzy. She had spent 40 years building a reputation, building wealth, building a shield against exactly this kind of treatment, and it had all been dismantled in 10 minutes by a 29-year-old with a badge he bought online and a bias he learned at home. "I am not resisting," Eleanor said, clearly looking directly at the camera phone the attorney was holding. "I want it on record that I am complying under duress. I am Eleanor Vance. I own Vance Plaza. These officers are arresting me without cause." "Turn around," Davis ordered, grabbing her wrist. The touch was firm, unyielding. He twisted her arm behind her back. Eleanor winced. Her shoulder was stiff in the mornings, and the sudden torque sent a sharp pain shooting down her arm. She didn't cry out. She wouldn't give Trent the satisfaction. She bit her lip and stared straight ahead at the brushed steel doors of the executive elevator. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. Yeah, tell it to the judge." Trent laughed. "Get her out of here, guys. I don't want her scaring the tenants." Kowalski moved to grab her other arm. The click of the ratchet on the handcuffs was audible in the silent lobby. One cuff was secured around her left wrist. Just as Davis was reaching for her right hand, the elevator dinged. It was a loud, clear chime that cut through the tension. The center doors of the executive bank slid open. Sarah Jenkins, the general manager, stepped out. She was holding a stack of files, laughing at something on her phone. She looked up, expecting to see the usual morning lobby traffic. Instead, she saw 2 police officers manhandling an older woman while the new security guard watched with a smirk. Sarah blinked. Then she squinted. Then the files dropped from her hands, scattering papers across the marble floor. "Stop!" Sarah screamed. It was a primal shriek that made everyone in the lobby jump. "What are you doing?" Sarah didn't run. She sprinted. Her high heels clicked frantically against the stone floor as she rushed toward the turnstiles. "Let her go! Oh my God! Let her go right now!" Officer Kowalski looked up, startled by the screaming woman charging at them. He kept his hand on Eleanor's arm, but paused. "Ma'am, stay back. This is a police matter." "Police matter?" Sarah reached the barrier and swiped her pass, bursting through the gate. She was breathless, her face pale with horror. "Do you have any idea who you are holding? That is Eleanor Vance. That is the owner of this building." The silence that followed was absolute. Trent Miller's smirk evaporated. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked from Sarah to Eleanor, then back to Sarah. "What?" "She is the owner," Sarah yelled at Trent, pointing a shaking finger in his face. "She is the CEO of Vance Global. She signs the contract for your security company. Are you insane?" Officer Kowalski looked down at Eleanor. He looked at the expensive suit. He looked at the dignified calm on her face, a stark contrast to the chaotic scene around her. He looked at the handcuff dangling from her left wrist. A feeling of dread, cold and heavy, settled into his gut. "Is this true?" Kowalski asked Eleanor. Eleanor didn't look at the officer. She looked directly at Trent Miller. Her eyes were hard, devoid of any sympathy. "I tried to tell him. I tried to use my pass. He told me I belonged at the service entrance. Officer Davis released Eleanor's arm as if it were red-hot iron. He took a step back, holding his hands up. We were told she was a trespasser. The security officer said, I don't care what he said. Sarah was shaking. She turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Vance, I am so sorry. I was in the briefing. I didn't have my phone. Oh my God. Unlock this, Eleanor said to Kowalski, lifting her left wrist. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Kowalski fumbled for his key. His hands were shaking slightly. He unlocked the cuff and removed it. Ma'am, I apologize. We were acting on the information provided by the complainant. We didn't know— You didn't ask, Eleanor corrected him, rubbing her wrist where the metal had pinched her skin. You assumed. You walked in here, saw a black woman and a security guard, and you decided I was the criminal. You didn't check my ID. You didn't check my access card. You just took out your handcuffs. Trent Miller was backing away slowly, moving toward the safety of the desk. She wouldn't show me her license, he stammered, his voice sounding thin and pathetic now. Protocol says unauthorized visitors need ID. I am not a visitor. Eleanor's voice finally rose, echoing off the walls. I built this place. I picked out this marble. I signed the checks for the steel in the walls, and you blocked me from my own lobby because you couldn't imagine that I belonged here. She walked toward Trent. She didn't rush. She walked with the terrifying grace of a predator who has cornered its prey. Trent hit the edge of the desk and stopped. He had nowhere to go. Sarah, Eleanor said, never taking her eyes off Trent. Yes, Mrs. Vance. Give me the binder, the security contract binder. It's behind the desk. Jessica, the terrified receptionist, scrambled to find the binder. She shoved it across the granite countertop toward Eleanor. Eleanor opened it. She didn't need to read it. She knew what it said, but she wanted Trent to see her reading it. She wanted him to understand the mechanics of his destruction. Titan Security Solutions. Eleanor read aloud. Clause 14, Section B. Security personnel are to treat all tenants and guests with courtesy and respect. Clause 19. Personnel serve at the pleasure of the building management and can be removed without cause immediately upon request. She snapped the binder shut. The sound was like a gunshot. You are removed, Eleanor said. Get off my property. Look, I was just doing my job. Trent tried to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. He looked at the police officers, hoping for some support, but Kowalski and Davis were staring at the floor, praying they wouldn't be named in the lawsuit they knew was coming. You were not doing your job, Eleanor said. Your job is security. You created a threat. You harassed the owner. You wasted police resources, and you humiliated yourself. I have rights. Trent muttered, his face red. You have the right to leave before I have you arrested for unlawful imprisonment, Eleanor said. Because that is what you did. You detained me without cause, and unlike you, I know the law. She turned to Officer Kowalski. Officer, I would like to file a formal complaint against this man for filing a false police report. He told you I was belligerent and aggressive. You have seen the video witnesses have taken. Was I aggressive? Kowalski looked at the attorneys who were still recording. No, ma'am. He stated you were causing a disturbance. It appears that was inaccurate. Inaccurate, Eleanor scoffed. It was a lie. I want his name and badge number in your report. And I want the body camera footage from both of you preserved. Sarah, call the legal department. Tell them to come down here. Now. Trent realized it was over. He unclipped his radio and set it on the desk. He took off his badge, the cheap plastic square that had given him so much false confidence, and dropped it next to the radio. He walked toward the door, passing the crowd of people who were now openly staring at him with judgment. He didn't look at anyone. He walked out into the bright sunlight, a man stripped of his power, leaving behind a career he had destroyed in 20 minutes. Eleanor watched him go. She didn't feel triumph. She felt exhausted. Her wrist throbbed. Her heart was beating too fast. She looked at the police officers. "You can leave," she said. "My lawyers will be in touch with your precinct captain." "Ma'am, again, we apologize," Kowalski said. They backed out of the lobby, eager to escape the gravity of their mistake. The lobby was quiet again, but the energy had changed. The staff looked at Eleanor with a new reverence mixed with fear. The tenants who had watched the scene were whispering, typing on their phones, sharing the video. Sarah Jenkins was near tears. "Mrs. Vance, are you okay? Do you want water? Do you want to sit down?" Eleanor took a deep breath. She smoothed her jacket again. She picked up her briefcase from where it had fallen. "I am fine, Sarah. I want a full review of the security contract by noon. I want Titan fired. Get a new vendor in here by tomorrow morning. And tell them if they ever send someone who cannot distinguish between a CEO and a criminal based on the color of their skin, I will sue them into bankruptcy." "Yes, ma'am. Consider it done." Eleanor walked to the elevators. The same elevators she had been trying to reach for 30 minutes. She scanned her gold card. The light turned green. The doors opened. As she rode up to the 30th floor, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. She looked at her reflection in the mirrored walls of the elevator. She saw the same woman she had been that morning. Successful, powerful, respected. But she also saw what Trent Miller had seen. She saw the vulnerability that no amount of money could cover. She saw the reality that for some people she would never be Eleanor Vance the mogul. She would only be a black woman in a place they felt she didn't belong. The elevator doors opened onto her private lobby. Her executive assistant, David, was waiting there. "Mrs. Vance, you're late. Is everything all right?" Sarah sounded frantic on the phone. Eleanor walked past him into her office. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. She could see other buildings she owned, other projects she had funded. It was an empire. "Everything is fine, David," she said, placing her briefcase on her mahogany desk. "Just a minor delay at the front desk." She walked to the window and looked down. She could see the police car pulling away. She could see the tiny figure of Trent Miller walking toward the bus stop. She thought about the thousands of people who looked like her but didn't have a gold access card. People who didn't have Sarah Jenkins to scream for them. People who didn't have the power to demand body camera footage or fire the security firm. What happened to them when they met a Trent Miller? They went to jail, or worse. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal for those who had wronged Eleanor. The video of the incident went viral, of course. The image of the dignified older woman being handcuffed in her own lobby while a smug security guard watched sparked national outrage. Titan Security Solutions lost the contract for Vance Plaza and subsequently 3 other major corporate accounts in the city. They issued a public apology, but the damage was done. Trent Miller was not only fired but was slapped with a civil lawsuit for defamation and emotional distress. He couldn't afford a lawyer, and the judgment, while symbolic given his lack of assets, ensured he would never work in security or law enforcement again. The police department conducted an internal review. Officer Kowalski was reprimanded for failing to verify property ownership before initiating an arrest. The department was forced to update its training protocols regarding private property disputes. Eleanor settled her lawsuit against the city for an undisclosed sum. She took every penny of it, matched it with $1 million of her own money, and started a legal defense fund for wrongful arrests in commercial spaces. But money and policy changes didn't fix the memory of that cold metal on her wrist. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the same lobby. A new security guard was at the desk, an older gentleman, respectful professional. He nodded as she entered. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance." "Good morning, Robert," she replied. She walked to the elevators, her heels clicking on the marble. She paused for a moment at the spot where she had been handcuffed. She looked at her wrist. There was no scar, but she could still feel the phantom weight of the cuff. She realized then that ownership wasn't just about the deed to the land. It was about the right to exist in a space without having to justify your presence. It was a right she had paid for with hard work, but one that had been challenged by the oldest prejudice in the world. Eleanor stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 30th floor. As the doors closed, shutting out the world below, she stood tall. She wasn't just rising to her office, she was rising above the assumption that she was anything less than the architect of her own destiny. The world might see a suspect, but she knew the truth. She was the owner. And she would never let anyone forget it again. Have you ever been judged or stopped in a place where you had every right to be? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below, and please share this story if you believe respect should be given to everyone, regardless of appearance. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth about our society.